Hey, welcome to GC 365. It's November 1, and I have a guest with me today. I'm so happy to have him here. I've been trying to get you here, Dan, for how many weeks?
This is our third shot.
And you're a bit of a reluctant customer, aren't you?
Fair to say.
So I'll have him introduce himself in a minute. But if you're watching today, just remember this. You have 2 months left. You've made it this far, way to go. And with that in mind, Dan, you've been reading the 1 Year Bible more than 1 year. You've been doing this quite a few years.
Did it last year too.
Yeah, you did it last year too. So it's something you can be proud of. You have a streak going that's way past mine. What's your daily streak?
343, I believe, is the number.
Unbelievable. Yeah. 343 days straight. Now, what that makes him is really nervous because he doesn't want to lose his streak. Because for a while, I had this great streak going, and then I forgot to one day, or I just missed it one day, and it messed me up. So you've got me beat on the daily streak. How about the weekly streak?
You got me on the weeks. I'm only 63 weeks.
Okay, and I have 100 and let's see, 100. I have to look at that. I got to look that up here just for fun. So Dan, while I'm looking that up, why don't you tell them what you do and where we meet?
Well, we meet for breakfast on Tuesday mornings down at Patty's Egg Nest. Yeah. I'm the owner of North Creek Roofing Company here in Mill Creek, and we've been doing that, my wife and I, for 25 years. 25 years. Yeah. That's awesome. I love your heart for the community, Dan. I want to speak to that. You've always loved Mill Creek, and you have invested them in huge ways. And there's just a lot of times that you have also just lived out your Christian values. When things get tough, it seems like you get more generous. And I really compliment you on that, because I think it's really cool. And what I love also is that you've made it a priority to read the Bible every day. So talk to me about that. Why do you do that? Why do you make that priority in your life? Well, I think that, of course, we're called to continue to be learning all the time. And I think really the only way we learn is to get in, read the Bible, and then ultimately practice it. But so beginning last year was really the first year in somewhat 40 years of being a believer that I've read through the entire Bible.
Wow.
And didn't do it every day.
Yeah.
This year I haven't missed a day.
Wow.
So, so
let's talk about that. Do you see the Bible in your daily life really playing out, and that it really works for you? Tell me about that. Have you noticed that this year?
Yeah, I think as you begin to read it, and this doesn't take place right away, but as it begins to build up on the inside of you, I think it just changes your thinking about certain things. Maybe things don't look as appealing as they maybe once did when you weren't maybe reading the Bible as regularly. So.
We talk about it, and you've mentioned it too, soap for your mind. It's like we have all this junk that comes into us every day, and when you read the Bible, it's like taking a shower every morning. It's like getting rid of the junk in your life and refocusing your mind. And
times of refreshing comes.
Yeah. Okay. So you also read the Bible. There's lots of boring sections in the Bible, right? Do you understand it all, by the way?
No.
So people are watching here. This is the first time they've read through it, and this is your second time. So. And I know we've all read the Bible at different times, heard lots of sermons on it, but when you read through it entirely, you get to sections that you don't understand, that's difficult. How do you handle those sections, Dan?
Just discipline and get through it.
Now,
nobody likes Leviticus, but
Leviticus. And we're about ready to come into a passage here, which is, let's get to today's reading, Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a really freaky book, isn't it?
Just slightly under the book of Revelation.
So. It is. Actually, it is. You could say Revelation and Ezekiel are very similar. In fact, I'm convinced that John read Ezekiel before he had his dreams in Revelation.
Could have happened, yeah.
Yeah, because there's similar stuff going on here. And so if you're reading the 1 Year Bible today, November 1, you're in Ezekiel 1, and you're saying, what's this Ezekiel? I like this. There's a couple things that really stand out to me, and I want to give you some context for today's reading. Number one, Ezekiel is actually in exile, which means the last book we just read, Jeremiah predicted that they're all going to be in exile. Now they're in exile, and Ezekiel has this vision while he is is essentially a captive. And it says it was July 31st. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
He does the exact day on his 30th year while while he was alive. So he's 30 years old, has this dream, and then he starts to describe this dream. Now, I mentioned something, you didn't pick up on this, but as I read down through here and this description of this thing that he's seeing, it doesn't make any sense to me. I read his deal. It doesn't make any sense, except that as I kind of get this, it can go in any direction the Spirit may choose. It moves forward, backward. And then it talks about this burl of, it has these wheels that went up, and then the Spirit, and there's in the wheels, and then there's like a fire and all this. And you have a son-in-law that is a pilot.
He's an F-16 pilot. Yeah.
F-16 pilot.
Yeah.
As I read all this, I was trying to think, what if he saw some of our modern day equipment, the fighting machines, what's the one that goes really slow that shoots I know there's just so
the
many.
A-10.
Yeah, okay.
The Warthog.
The Warthog.
Yeah.
Okay, so they have all these different things, and then some that go in any direction. And I kind of picture that as something he's seeing. I don't know that that's the way it is, but in the midst of all that, he hears from God, and he falls on his face, and he hears a word speaking. And in chapter 2, if you're reading, you see his call. It says that I listened carefully to his words, he said. And then he has this call, and here's his call. He says, I'm sending you to talk to this stubborn, hard-hearted people. What a description. Okay, so a question for you. Do you think we've changed over the years? Do you think we're any less hard-hearted or stubborn?
Oh, sometimes I think I'm more so sometimes.
Yeah.
But probably less, but in certain situations I find myself maybe even more so.
Yeah, so I think about that in all of us. We go to work. You have how many employees? 50 employees?
No, probably 35 or 40 employees.
Okay, so you have all these employees. From time to time, you run into somebody that's stubborn or hard-hearted, or customers. That's another thing. You have hundreds of customers.
We love our customers.
They're not stubborn or hard-hearted, but occasionally, right? Isn't there one or two that just...
Probably.
Yeah. So, I think of this. I think, here's Ezekiel. I love God's honesty, saying, I'm not sending you to an easy task. You got this hard task. You got to go talk to these stubborn, hard-hearted people. Now, the next one actually, I think is kind of interesting. You pointed this out in the first 3 verses that you kind of like the first 3 verses of chapter 3. What stood out for you? Well,
what he says, "Son of man, eat what I'm giving you, eat this scroll." And when I read through the first 3 verses there, it really reminded me of, taking the word of God, eating it. And then at the end there, it says it tasted like sweet as honey in his mouth. And I mentioned earlier, but times of refreshing come from the presence of the Lord. And that's what it reminded me of, just getting that word of God on the inside of you.
It's a visual. He's having a dream. He's dreaming that he's eating a scroll, and in that day it would be like eating the Bible. It's in our case eating our phone, I suppose.
Probably.
But here's this one made me laugh. He says, "Look, I'm gonna make you as obstinate and as hard-hearted as they are." And he says, "I have made your forehead as hard as the hardest rock. So don't be afraid of them or fear their angry looks." This just makes me laugh. I wonder what Ezekiel was like. He must have been a stubborn old guy too,
And a pretty point-blank individual.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can just picture him walking up to the most stubborn, hard-hearted person that's anti-God, following the rules, the law at that time, everything anti that you could be. He just stuck in there and bottom right to the tail. And Ezekiel had this task of talking to the leaders and to people and really standing up. And I do like this. He says, don't be afraid of them. In our culture today, we can kind of get afraid of our Christian, standing up for our Christian values, right? Different times.
Yeah.
And I like what he says here. We don't have to be afraid when we're doing the right thing. And That's Ezekiel. So that gets for the first 3 chapters. Now I have to tell you, it gets a lot wilder in the next little bit. I do like the chapters in the future where he talks about the valley of dry bones that comes alive. There's some cool songs and stuff that come on that. So I hope you enjoy Ezekiel. But we then switch over to Hebrews, and we're in the 3rd chapter of Hebrews, and there's a whole discussion here. I'm just going to point this out in verse 4. It says, every house has a builder, but one who built everything is God. And that's just kind of a reminder that, we live in houses, but it's God that built our house, isn't it? And it's God that builds our business. You live your life like your business is God's, right?
We do.
Yeah. Now, occasionally, being honest, do you ever take it back? Occasionally you think, oh no, this is mine, I'm gonna mess with this, or is it?
I think as human beings we do that.
Yeah. Well,
and so
church, same thing. You know, I'm a leader of the church. I'm supposed to follow God as best I can, and there's different times that I think it all weighs on me that I got to carry this whole load, and I keep forgetting, no, this is God's church. I'm just His servant at this point. I also like the next thing where it says that Christ, His Son, is in charge of God's entire house, and we are God's house. So we keep our courage and remain confident in our hope in Christ. And I think that's just kind of saying He's building His house in us too. He's always building, He's working on us. So
it almost like it's talking about a physical house, but really He's talking about the house on the inside of us.
Right. Our spiritual house.
Yep.
It's so good. That's really good. Now, Psalms, when we get to Psalms, I want to tell you, sometimes the Psalms stand out to me. When you read Psalms, how do they hit you?
Kind of the same way. Occasionally there's something good there. Yeah. I kind of read them just,
see if it's something there.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And this one was one of the ones that I only got the first verse. I see, okay, he's just going to spend the Psalms praising God, and then he just describes everything he can praise God for. That's what I got out of the Psalm. I didn't really get anything more, so it's okay if you didn't either. And then the Proverbs, interesting Proverbs. Occasionally the Proverbs just tell something that's true. And here he says, people cover their hatred with pleasant words, but they're deceiving you. Have you ever had anyone hate you, Dan?
Yeah.
Have you? And do they do that to your face, or do they do it behind the scenes?
Mostly it's probably behind your back more than anything, but occasionally somebody gets after you.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
I have people,
Never happened to you?
I've had a few people tell me they hate me. I know that. But I also know that there's times it's seething behind the thing. It's kind of a truth here. And he says, I like what it says, wrongdoing will be exposed in public. And I think that's true. It either comes out in this life or the next life. That's really true. Well, hey, thank you for joining us today. And Dan, thanks for doing this. It's not as painful as you thought it was going to be.
It wasn't all bad.
Okay. So we're glad you joined us on GC 365. And I hope you stick with it all the way through to the end. Dan will tell you it's worth doing, right?
It is.
It is.
Worth doing it.
Second year.
Yep.
All right. We'll see you next week on GC 365.